Welcome to Echoes of the Lost audiobook, where forgotten stories come to life. Dive into worlds of mystery, survival, and the unknown. If you enjoy our stories, don't forget to like and subscribe to stay updated with our latest audiobooks. Chap 53, Corridor Beneath the Dark. Ryder stood on the cold metal floor of the corridor below the gas forge, his right hand gripping the long spear, his eyes scanning the thick darkness ahead, where faint light from the hole above barely lit a few meters of wet, rusted metal walls. The central machine's deep thrum echoed distantly from above, drowned by a steady, sharp metallic screech from deep within the corridor, like the breath of a massive machine operating in the shadows. Cold air rose from the floor, carrying a mix of burnt metal and musty dampness, punctuated by distant water drips, cleaner than the toxic smoke above but heavy, oppressive in its own way, each breath no longer burning but chilling his chest. Lena stood beside him, her left hand clutching her bandaged shoulder, dried blood staining the cloth brown, her keen eyes sweeping the corridor, her right hand gripping her old crude spear, her breath slowing in the cold. Torin knelt nearby, one arm supporting Mira as she climbed down, the young girl breathing deeper through her useless filter, her breath steadier, her pale face showing faint relief without smoke. Kalia stood at the group's rear, her crude mace upright in her right hand, her gaze fixed on the darkness ahead, her left hand brushing the wall, feeling faint vibrations from deep within. The control point of Archive was now a deeper layer, a cold corridor hidden beneath the forge's floor, where the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, led them into a new trial in the dark. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking steadily on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message, Archive, Ryder, the corridor is data. Go deeper, or stand still, the trial has begun. The words echoed in his mind, cold and uncompromising, confirming they'd entered the next phase of the experiment, and this darkness wasn't a place to rest. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 38 North, below Gas Forge. Archive Phase 4, Corridor, what data? He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing into the dark, listening to the metallic screech, steady, but laced with a deeper vibration, like footsteps approaching from afar. Corridor is data, he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the dripping water, explore, or face it? He inhaled the cold air deeply, analyzing, burnt metal, mustiness, and a faint tang, like a hint of something alive in the shadows. Lena turned to him, her left hand still on her shoulder, her eyes flashing with caution and strain. You hear that? She asked, her voice rough, stepping forward slowly, her spear aimed into the dark. The screech, like a machine, but something else too. She took a deep breath through her nose, no cloth now, frowning as the faint tang hit, her sharp gaze sweeping the metal walls, seeking the sound source. Ryder nodded, stepping beside her, his right hand gripping the spear, his left pressing the wall, cold, damp, a faint vibration pulsing through his fingers, like a distant machine's heartbeat. Not just a machine, he said, his voice low but certain, crouching to check the floor, wet, streaked with water, but not slippery, designed for footing. Vibrations, like steps, or something moving. He scribbled fast in his notebook, corridor wet, vibrations plus screech, tangy scent, machine or creature? He turned to the group, his voice clear, this corridor's alive, we go deeper, but carefully. Stay close, listen hard. Torin stood, helping Mira up, his cloudy eyes flickering with worry at, alive. Alive how, down here? He asked, his voice slow, his arm tightening around Mira as if the dark might swallow her. Mira drew a long breath, the cold air sharpening her senses, her bone-white face showing faint resolve. No smoke. I can breathe, she whispered, her voice faint but relieved, her hand brushing the wall, feeling the vibrations. But if it's a machine, or something else? Kalia stepped closer to Ryder, her crude mace raised, her gaze locked on the darkness, where the metallic screech grew clearer, mingled with steady water drips. That tang, like the monster up there, she said, her voice soft but keen, crouching to check the floor, a small, sticky black streak, like the monster's dried blood, trailing deeper into the corridor. It came from here? She frowned, turning to Ryder, her eyes tense but curious, her hand gripping her mace, ready for what lay ahead. Ryder frowned, kneeling by the black streak, his right hand brushing it with the spear tip, sticky, cold, the same tangy stench as the monster's blood, but older, dried longer. Maybe, he said, his voice low, standing, his eyes following the streak into the dark. They released it from here, this corridor's the source, or a path. He wrote slowly in his notebook, black streak, tangy, from corridor, monster from below? He turned to the group, his voice taut, monster traces, we follow, but be ready to fight. The screech is closer, don't get caught off guard. The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing faster, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, Ryder, the darkness is living data. Go deeper to know, or stand still to die, the trial doesn't stop. The voice cut off, but the metallic screech from the corridor spiked, paired with a distant, low growl, like something waking in the shadows. Ryder froze, his eyes widening, his chest tightening as the human tone hit again. The Seraphim weren't just guiding them, they'd activated something in the corridor to force them forward. He wrote quickly, his hand shaky, human voice, screech plus growl, darkness alive, what trial? He turned to the group, his voice firm, they've triggered something, we move now. Tight formation, listen sharp. Lena gripped her spear tighter, her eyes flashing with anger and resolve. Living data, she echoed, her voice dropping low, stepping forward, her spear aimed into the dark. Another monster? She took a cold breath, her gaze fierce despite her shoulders' ache, ready to face it. Torin guided Mira forward, his voice trembling, if it's a monster, what then? Mira looked up, her weary eyes sharp. We beat one, we can do it again, she whispered, her voice faint but steadfast, clutching Torin's hand, stepping slowly into the dark. Kalia stood beside Ryder, her crude mace raised, her gaze following the black streak deeper into the corridor. That growl, far, but closing, she said, her voice soft, stepping slowly along the trail, inhaling the cold air to analyze. Something's there, do we go? She turned to Ryder, her eyes tense but trusting. Ryder nodded, taking the first step into the darkness, his spear aimed forward, his eyes tracking the black streak, the metallic screech nearer, the low growl rumbling again, vibrations pulsing through the floor. Go, he said, his voice low, leading the group deeper, the shadows swallowing them, but they didn't stop, the corridor beneath the dark of the dead land awaited. Chap 54, Tools from the Dark. Ryder stepped slowly through the cold metal corridor beneath the gas forge, his right hand gripping the long spear, his eyes tracing the darkness ahead, where the dried black blood streak from the monster trailed deeper, fading into the faint light from the hole behind. A sharp metallic screech rang steadily from the shadows, mingled with a distant, low growl, vibrations pulsing through the wet metal floor beneath his feet, like the heartbeat of something waiting in the dark. Cold air rose from the floor, carrying burnt metal, musty dampness, and a faint tang, chilling his chest with each breath, cleaner than the toxic smoke above. Lena stayed close, her left hand clutching her bandaged shoulder, dried blood staining the cloth brown, her keen eyes sweeping the corridor, her right hand gripping her old crude spear, her breath slowing in the cold. Torin followed, one arm supporting Mira, the young girl breathing steadier in the clean air, her pale face showing faint resolve, her left hand brushing the wall for balance. Kalia brought up the rear, her crude mace raised in her right hand, her gaze fixed on the blood streak, her left hand picking up a jagged metal scrap from the floor, testing its edge. The corridor under Archive was a cold maze, where the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, had turned the darkness into living data, and the group had to push deeper to survive. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking fast on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message, Archive, Rider, the darkness is the trial. Tools are strength, data demands life. The words echoed in his mind, cold and unrelenting, hinting they'd need more than crude weapons to face the nearing threat. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 39 North, below Gas Forge. Archive Phase 4, Corridor, New Tools. He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing into the dark, listening to the metallic screech, closer now, laced with the low growl, vibrations intensifying underfoot. Tools are strength, he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the dripping water, they want us to craft to live. He inhaled the cold air deeply, analyzing, the tang sharper, like another monster's sign, but the corridor offered scraps, a chance for new weapons. Lena turned to him, her left hand still on her shoulder, her eyes flashing with caution and strain. You hear that? She asked, her voice rough, stopping as the low growl rumbled again, nearer. It's coming, this spear won't hold if it's bigger than before. She took a cold breath, frowning as the tang hit, her gaze sweeping the walls, spotting a long, rusted metal rod dangling, still solid. Ryder nodded, stepping to the rod, his right hand setting the spear on the floor, his left grabbing the metal, about a meter long, heavier than his spear, but blunt. Not enough, he said, his voice low but firm, rummaging his bag for old cloth and a sharp metal shard, starting to craft, tying the shard to the rod's end, forming a new spear, longer, with a keener tip. This'll pierce deep, aim for neck or chest. He picked up a short metal pipe from the floor, attaching a jagged stone found nearby, securing it with cloth to make a heavier mace than Kalia's. Use this if it's close. He scribbled fast in his notebook, new spear plus heavy mace, metal plus stone, versus bigger monster. He turned to the group, his voice clear, growls close, we need stronger weapons. Take these, get ready. Torin steadied Mira, his cloudy eyes flickering with fear at the growl. Bigger than before? He asked, his voice slow and shaky, his arm tightening around Mira, as if the dark might spawn something unstoppable. Mira took a deep breath, the cold air sharpening her, her weary eyes glinting with hope. If it's bigger, we hit fast, she whispered, her voice faint but resolute, picking up a small metal scrap from the floor, handing it to Ryder. Can you use this? Kalia stepped closer, her crude mace lowered, her gaze sweeping the blood streak then watching Ryder craft. Give me the new mace, she said, her voice soft but keen, reaching for the heavy mace, testing its weight, cold metal haft, sharp stone head. It's big, I'll hit the legs first, like last time. She took a cold breath, wincing as the tang grew stronger, her eyes tense but trusting, her hand gripping the new mace. Ryder nodded, handing her the heavy mace, his right hand gripping the new spear, his eyes following the blood streak deeper into the corridor, the metallic screech closer, the low growl rumbling again, vibrations shaking the floor, something heavy approaching. Legs first, then neck, he said, his voice low, analyzing fast, the corridor narrow, dark, but wide enough to fight if they coordinated. It's big, but slow, we use the dark to dodge. He wrote slowly in his notebook, growl plus vibrations, big monster, narrow corridor, weakness? He turned to the group, his voice taut, they've unleashed something, prepare to fight. Lena, neck, Kalia, legs, I'll back you. Mira, distract if you can. The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing faster, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, Ryder, tools are data. Survive the darkness, or die in it, the trial doesn't stop. The voice cut off, but the metallic screech spiked, paired with a deep, closer growl, the floor trembling underfoot. Ryder froze, his eyes widening, his chest tightening as the human tone hit again. The Seraphim weren't just testing, they were measuring their crafting and combat in the dark. He wrote quickly, his hands shaky, human voice, growl close, tools equals data, new monster. He turned to the group, his voice firm, it's here, use the weapons, hold formation. Go. Lena gripped her old crude spear tighter, her eyes flashing with anger and resolve, stepping forward, her spear aimed into the dark. Its neck, she said, her voice low, crouching, taking a cold breath, her gaze fierce despite her shoulders ache, ready to thrust. Torin pressed Mira against the wall, his voice trembling, don't let it near. Mira looked up, her weary eyes sharp, her hand clutching the small metal scrap. I can throw, she whispered, her voice faint but steadfast, ready to toss it into the dark to distract. Kalia stood beside Ryder, her heavy mace raised, her gaze locked on the darkness where the growl echoed. Legs first, she said, her voice soft, crouching low, stepping forward slowly, her hand gripping the mace, poised to smash. Ryder led, his new spear aimed straight, his eyes tracking the blood streak, the metallic screech drowning everything, the deep growl nearer, a tall, shadowy shape emerging, red eyes blazing, bigger than before. There it is, he said, his voice low, the group closing ranks, tools from the dark ready to face the trial of the dead land. Chap 55, Clash in the Dark. Ryder stood in the cold metal corridor beneath the gas forge, his right hand gripping the new spear he'd crafted, his eyes locked on the towering shadow ahead, where blazing red eyes glowed in the darkness, larger and brighter than the last monster, its deep growl shaking the wet metal floor. The sharp metallic screech from deep within the corridor drowned all else, blending with strong vibrations underfoot, like the pulse of a living machine, or a predator closing in. Cold air rose from the floor, carrying burnt metal, musty dampness, and the monster's thick tang, chilling his chest with each breath, free of smoke but unclouded now. Lena stood beside him, her left hand clutching her bandaged shoulder, dried blood staining it brown, her keen eyes aiming at the monster's neck, her right hand gripping her old crude spear, her breath slow but tense. Torin pressed against the wall, one arm supporting Mira, the young girl breathing steadily in the cold air, her pale face showing faint resolve, her left hand clutching a small metal scrap to distract. Kalia stood to Ryder's right, her new heavy mace raised, her gaze fixed on the monster's gaunt but solid legs, her hand tightening on the haft, ready to swing. The corridor under Archive was now an arena, where the Seraphim, the hidden controllers, had unleashed a new, bigger, stronger monster, and the group had to face it with tools from the dark to survive. He pulled the Seraphim device from his bag, its red light blinking fast on the cold metal surface, the small screen showing a curt message, Archive, Ryder, the strong is data. Survive it, or die by it, the trial spares none. The words echoed in his mind, cold and emotionless, confirming this monster as the next test, where only the strongest would pass. He opened his notebook, its pages crumpled and gray, his fingers brushing the rough surface as he wrote slowly, Day 40 North, below Gas Forge. Archive Phase 4, new monster, bigger, stronger. He paused, his dark brown eyes narrowing in the dark, analyzing the monster's shape, nearly 4 meters tall, hunched but muscular, its arms longer, no scythes now but sharp metal claws, built to tear through anything. "The strong is data," he muttered, his low, hoarse voice blending with the growl, "they want proof." He inhaled the cold air deeply, analyzing the tang, thicker, like fresh blood mixed with metal, a sign of a more horrific hybrid. Lena turned to him, her left hand still on her shoulder, her eyes flashing with resolve and strain. "You see it?" she asked, her voice rough, crouching low, her spear aimed at the monster's neck, now just 10 meters away in the narrow corridor. "It's bigger, thick neck, but I can hit it." She took a cold breath, frowning as the tang hit, her gaze locked on the red eyes, her hand tightening on her spear, poised to charge. Ryder nodded, standing tall, his right hand gripping the new spear, his eyes sweeping the monster. It moved slowly, heavily, each step shaking the floor, but its red eyes blazed as if sizing them up. "Hit the neck, but watch its claws," he said, his voice low but firm, analyzing fast. The narrow corridor constrained it, but those metal claws could sweep easily. "It's slow, we need to be fast." He scribbled fast in his notebook, "New monster, 4M, slow, metal claws, neck plus legs weak." He turned to the group, his voice clear, "Coordinate, Lena neck, Kalia legs, I'll back you. Mira, distract when it's close. Hit quick." Torin pressed Mira against the wall, his cloudy eyes flickering with fear as the monster advanced. "Those claws," he whispered, his voice shaky, his hand gripping Myra's shoulder, as if to pull her from harm. Mira took a deep breath, the cold air sharpening her weary eyes keen. "I can throw," she whispered, her voice faint but resolute, clutching her metal scrap, ready to toss it left to draw its gaze. Kalia lunged, her heavy mace raised, her eyes locked on the monster's left leg, gaunt but sturdy, like a pillar for its massive frame. "Legs first," she said, her voice soft but sharp, swinging the mace hard into its knee. A dry crack of metal on bone rang out, the monster roared, its left leg buckling slightly, but its left claw swept sideways, missing Kalia's head by inches. She dodged back, taking a cold breath, her eyes tense but fixed on her target. Ryder leapt in, his new spear aimed at the monster's neck as it faltered, the tip plunged into thick hide, tearing a long gash, black, foul blood spraying onto the metal walls. The monster bellowed, its hunched head whipping toward him, its right claw slashing through the air, missing his chest by a hair. He stepped back, his chest tightening, inhaling cold air, analyzing. Kalia's hit slowed it, but the claws were too lethal. "Neck, Lena, now," he shouted, his voice taut, turning to her. Lena charged, her old crude spear thrusting at the monster's neck. The tip pierced the skin, black blood spurting as it roared, its body staggering, its left claw sweeping sideways again, but she dodged, retreating, her left hand clutching her aching shoulder, her eyes blazing. "Got it," she hissed through gritted teeth, her voice rough, staying upright. Mira threw her metal scrap left of the monster, a clang echoed, it turned, its red eyes shifting to the wall, giving the group a brief pause. Kalia seized it, lunging again, her heavy mace smashing the right leg. A sharp crack of breaking bone sounded, the monster collapsed fully, its roar weakening, its massive frame crashing to the floor. Ryder jumped in, his new spear stabbing deep into the neck again, piercing its throat, black blood gushing as it thrashed, then stilled, its red eyes dimming in the dark. He stood frozen, breathing hard, his gaze sweeping the group, all safe, but exhausted. "Done," he said, his voice low, scribbling fast in his notebook. "Monster down, neck plus legs hit, claws dangerous, trial passed." The Seraphim device buzzed hard, its red light flashing fast, and the cold, deep voice crackled through the speaker, "Ryder, the strong has fallen. Vitality is data, the next trial lies deeper." The voice cut off, but the metallic screech echoed again from the corridor, farther now, like a sign of another threat. Ryder frowned, his chest tightening as the human tone hit. The Seraphim weren't done, they wanted the group to go deeper still. He turned to the group, his voice taut, "They're not finished, rest, but stay ready. Something else is coming." Lena dropped to one knee, her hand on her shoulder, her eyes flashing with fatigue but defiance. "Deeper," she echoed, her voice low, taking a cold breath, her gaze piercing the darkness ahead. Torin held Mira, his voice trembling. "More, after that?" Mira looked up, her weary eyes sharp. "We lived, we can keep going," she whispered, her voice faint but determined. Kalia stood by the monster's corpse, her heavy mace lowered, her gaze fixed on the dark. "The screech, starting again," she said, her voice soft, taking a cold breath, her hand gripping her mace. Ryder glanced at the monster's body, then the group. They'd won, but weren't safe. "Deeper," he said, his voice low, leading them into the shadows, the corridor beneath the dead land still testing them.